Hi, Rod Kane from the Washington Grand Company here with another video about my favorite ancient medieval game, Triumph. So we're going to talk today, in case it's not obvious, about ranged combat. So we'll discuss what units are allowed to participate in ranged combat as shooters, not just targets, and how it works, and the difference between ranged combat and, let's say, close combat. So I hope you'll stay with me today, and we'll get through ranged combat, and then we'll move on to some other videos about terrain and other aspects of the game in the future. Thanks. All right, so today we're going to talk about ranged combat. Ranged combat in Triumph is a different phase in the combat turn, the turn sequence. It's also handled differently than close combat. Close combat in Triumph is simultaneous, so the two stands are touching each other, they calculate their combat results, and they take the effect. Both sides, bad things can happen, good things can happen. Range combat's a little bit different. First of all, what units in Triumph can actually fire at range? Artillery, massed archers that are firing volleys of arrows, war wagons, and pavis, which are massed archers firing volleys of missiles or arrows, but with a screen of infantry or protection in front of them. So we have these four types are the only ones that actually have ranged combat fire. The firing cone or area of death in front of an archer stand is a rectangle. So essentially, any unit that's inside this rectangle, so one base width wide on either side, is in the zone or the arc of fire of this unit. And then the range is 3. So for this particular unit, as long as that unit's within 3 MU, it could shoot. Artillery, exactly the same rectangle, except for the artillery, the box goes out 8 MU. So the artillery has a much longer range, and it can reach out and shoot 8 MU. How does range combat work? Well, every ranged combat unit has a ranged combat factor. This is the factor that it applies to a die roll when it's shooting at a target. Every unit also has a receiving fire, if you can think of it that way. So when we go to our really nice QRS, which I still probably will do a unit just on the QRS, you'll see there's a little box here, covers range combat. And essentially, archers, pavis, war wagon are +3. Artillery's a +4. So when they shoot at something, they roll a 6-sided die, and they add that combat factor. So it's a 6-sided die plus the combat factor. The person being shot at, or the stand that's being shot at, also has a combat factor. So different units have different resistance to being shot at. So for example, your typical foot response would be a +3. So it's +3 for the archer shooting, +3 for the foot. There is a chance that you could kill heavy foot, for example, with archery fire. If you, once again, if you double them, they're destroyed. If you tie, nothing happens. And if you beat them by 1 or more, they're typically pushed back. So archers firing at heavy foot, the combat results is kind of similar in that it's the standard beaten by 1, they fall back. There are different factors for different troop types. So heavy foot, +3. They're pretty tough. Archery fire doesn't typically bother them. Most of the foot are +3. Rabble and Horde. We talked about Rabble and Horde before. And Rabble and Horde are +2. They don't have shields. They don't have armor. They don't really like being shot at. They're much more likely to disintegrate or run away from archery fire. Chariots, cataphracts, elite cavalry, and elephants are +3. Also, on average, can handle the archery fire. Most of the other mounted is a little bit more sensitive. So the lighter horse, knights, things that were traditionally had trouble with archery fire because either they were going in close proximity to the enemy and getting shot at, or because they were too lightly armored to handle it, they were more susceptible to archery fire. So it's Depending on what type of unit you're shooting at, the factor is different for your receiving of the archery fire. So how does it work? For that, we're going to line up some enemy archers. So we're going to have some enemy archers here. And we're going to put a few other units in here to intersperse and show how this works. So we've got some heavy foot, and then we have a stand of archers, and then we have a single archer here, 3 archers over here. So first of all, you move your units, and then you conduct archery fire. Artillery cannot move and fire. So if it moves, it doesn't fire, and it never fires on the opponent's movement. So it's a little bit slower rate of fire and much more restricted its movement. The war wagons and the pavis and the archers can move and fire. So in this particular case here, we're going to say that this side is moving, and they have to get within 3 before they can take a shot. These units here only move 3, so when you look at their movement rate, they can't get to the enemy, so they're going to have to move up, and then they're going to shoot. So for the purpose of this demonstration, the ranged combat takes place such that the non-moving player fires first. So these 3 archers would get 3 shots at any unit they want before this archer gets to shoot. And the effect is immediate. So for example, this archer is a +3. He can shoot at any eligible target in front of him. So let's say he picks the heavy foot or the archers, but he's going to pick the heavy foot. Heavy foot get a +3. So let's say the heavy foot roll a 3, +3 is 6, and the archer rolls a 2, +3 is 5. There's no effect. Okay? Now, the archer next to him could choose to shoot at the heavy foot, because the way that we draw arc of fire, one corner and the center to a corner and the center of the other unit, or to its side. So as long as you can see, if you have a clear line of sight to a corner and center, you can shoot. He could shoot at the heavy foot. He could shoot at the other archer. If he chooses the other archer, its receiving fire is a 3. So we're going to say, for the purpose of this demonstration, that he rolls a 5, and this guy rolls a 4. He fired. He didn't score higher. This is 8. This is going to be 7. He didn't score higher. Therefore, this archer stays where he is. Nothing happened. Now, this next guy, he could fire at the heavy foot. They're +3. Or he could fire at this other archer. He is going to fire at the archers again. So you do this 1, 2, 3. What happened before doesn't matter. So even though these guys fired at this guy and missed, he can now take another shot. So he's going to take a shot at these archers as well. And we're going to actually roll this one. Oh, he rolled a 6. These guys rolled a 4. He gets a total of 9. He gets a total of 7. That means that this archer unit will back up its base depth. So he wasn't doubled. He's not destroyed, but he is going to pull back. Okay? So the effect there was that now this formation is broken. They've been moved back, so you now have 3 groups here. For command control gets a bit of an issue. But now it's his turn to shoot. He survived. 2 shots on him. He survived, so now he will fire back. He can pick this archer directly in front of him. He could theoretically not shoot anybody else, because the only person who's close enough now after the pushback is the archer in the center. So he would fire back. This archer gets a 5 + 3. Oh, his shot's no good. Nothing happens. That's the end of the ranged combat. And then if we had close combat in this particular mini scenario, we'd go into close combat. So the ranged fire takes place immediately for each unit. So you fire stand by stand by stand. You can shoot a second time at another target. You can shoot a third time if he's in range. So these, if every one of these shots had missed, they could have all 3 tried to shoot at the single archer in the middle. It's designed to break up enemy formations. It's designed to stop enemy mounted if possible, and it's also pretty good against lightly armored troops like Horde and Rabble, who don't really want to be shot at as well. That's how it works for Pavis. That's how it works for the War Wagon. Artillery, a little bit different. The artillery, if this had been a unit of artillery moving with this unit, If we actually had moved the artillery forward, the artillery doesn't get to shoot, but it could be shot at. If the artillery was in the stationary unit and it did not move, once again, if this is the unit that's moving, on this unit's turn, they would get to, this player's turn, they would get to shoot, but the artillery does not shoot back. The artillery is only going to shoot if it's the artillery's turn and it doesn't move, and it has a target. So that's how the cycle of range combat goes. We mentioned briefly before, there are other units in the game that have bows, like our skirmishers and our horse bow. And there's a few others like the slingers that could also be skirmishers, but skirmishers and horse bow and elite cav can also have bows. Their ability to fire at range is already pre-calculated into their range combat result table. That's why they have that special evade option against a lot of troops. Same thing with chariots, which are also missile platform. So chariots also have bows, but their ability to fire at range is calculated into their range, into their close combat, not range combat. These units here, war wagon, these archers, artillery, they're the ones that get to fire in the range combat phase. And once again, it's no memory from turn to turn. So you fire, you fire, you fire, and then you would fire. It's a really slick, easy system. It works pretty well. One other thing that I would point out is when you're shooting at a general stand, there's a -1. So it's a little bit harder to shoot the general. That's just so that generals are a little tougher, a little better equipped. If you shoot at the rear of a stand, so if any part of your shot is going to happen on the rear of a stand, the result where they would fall back doesn't happen. They get a -1 to their combat factor. So when you're going to give them a -1. So instead of +3, these guys would be +2. You'd still be +3. So there is more of a chance that something bad could happen, like dying. But they will not fall back towards the rear. They just sit where they are if they lose by less than double. So that's archery, a range combat phase, missile fire in Triumph. I think it works really well. One of the things that you'll notice too is because you can take multiple shots and your idea is to break up a line, is you're not going to want your archers typically in a group. You're going to tend to want to spread them out in the army, because it isn't the number of archers firing any one unit. It's the ability to get archery fire every turn and make sure that you're doing something with them. So you want to make sure that those archers are spread out and covering the whole length of your army. Archers are also good in rough terrain. And then we get into the terrain section, I'll talk about shooting when the line of sight is blocked. So they have to have a clear line of sight. So they can't fire from inside the woods. They have to have at least part of their base out of the woods in order to fire. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in the terrain section. Once again, my name is Rod Kane. Thank you for watching, and this game is called Triumph.